It's a very striking coincidence that some of the most revered composers of the 20th century all wrote violin concertos, not even within the decade of the 30s, but within 8 years, 1931 to 1939. So you have Stravinsky and Prokofiev and Bela Bartok, Alban Berg, Schoenberg, Samuel Barber, William Walton, Benjamin Britten, Darius Milhaud, Karl Amadeus Hartmann, Szymanowski, Ernst Bloch, Castelnuovo Tedesco, and I'm leaving out many. A very eloquent man came backstage after I played in Washington, D.C., came backstage, and I wish I remembered exactly how he said it, because he put it so well. He said, look, this time, right before the Second World War, was a time of great unease. It was a time of worry and trepidation, and people felt as if on the edge of a volcano, ready to erupt and waiting for it to erupt. And he said, how is that reflected in the music of the time? And how does that relate to the times we live in today and the music that is being written and that we're hearing today? And I find that way of thinking fascinating. I don't know any of the answers, but I think it's fascinating. You know, music has a way of capturing a time. This final movement of the Barber Violin Concerto, you can see urban America being built. You can see the skyscrapers coming up. And it's true, you know, all this kind of machinist. You know, and all this busy activity, and of course the jazz. And you know, maybe you can hear the sirens, you know. Or even the traffic, you know, car honking. I'm thinking of a passage in the Walton Concerto where he writes a 12-tone series. Then he cadences in B minor. And then the melody comes down. You know, in traditional B minor melody, with this 12-tone series accompanying it. You know, it was a time of incredible musical innovation, and all these things that were coming up were new and kind of getting mixed up and were working together. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to study. This Walton Violin Concerto, my wife, Adele Anthony, introduced me to the piece. She's been playing it for years and years, even when we were students. She played the Violin Concerto, and I've loved it. You know, sometimes, I guess I've said this about this piece, sometimes in life you come across a piece of music or anything, you know, a work of art, anything, that you just can't wait to come back to it, you know. You just can't wait to see it again and be with it and experience it. And then once you're done, you just can't wait to come back to it again, you know, and again and again and again. And that's how I feel about this piece. Britain's violin concerto was reputed to have been a reaction to the Spanish Civil War. And, you know, if you think of Walton's violin concerto, although not necessarily a reaction to war and wartime events, it was very much a concerto written in the 1930s. He composed the last movement while on tour in the Royal Army. And he, you know, his house where he had left the score to the violin concerto was bombed in the war, and he was worried that the score would be lost. When he found it, he joked that he wished it had never been found, but we're all very lucky that it was The Prokofiev Concerto was maybe the first one of these pieces that I learned when I was a teenager. I remember starting to play this piece. A dark side, a plot to it that's fascinating. You know, this. Without the composers telling us what the story is, all we can do as interpreters is sort of sit back and try to imagine what was the motivation behind this. And I guess I've read some articles where they write about Prokofiev as a social commentator, as a political commentator as well. The one composer who left us a clue was Hartmann. He actually wrote his violin concerto, which he titled Concerto Funèbre. He said this is a reaction to the time. And I guess the idea was that it's a reaction to the invasion of Czechoslovakia. And the piece uses a Czech hymn in the solo violin, played very softly, you know. Over this very sharp, dissonant activity in the string orchestra. I'm not sure what drew me to these pieces. I guess it is something. A lot of them are pieces that I've lived with for a long time. As you were saying before, you know, when I was a student, I learned some of these pieces. I learned the Prokofiev Concerto. I learned the Bartók Concerto. I learned Samuel Barber's Concerto. And really, I hadn't thought of them as a group until about 10 years ago. I guess a lot of people were doing that at the time. It was the 2000, and everybody was saying, well, you know, what's your favorite music from the 20th century? and it's hard not to notice, you know, that when it comes to violin concertos, they're all written, you know, almost simultaneously.